Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari Chan, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you all have had an excellent day or are going to have an excellent day. I am super excited because we are continuing with the reading of Peerless Volume 3, also known as Wu Shuang by Meng Xi Shi. This is going to be the fourth reading, and we are starting at chapter 93. So I hope you all enjoy. There were no lamps in the carriage. Only the bright moonlight trickling in through the swaying carriage curtains provided any illumination. Warm lips moved against Sui Bichu's, murmuring 4 words with the faintest whisper of breath. Sui Bichu was stunned. Why hadn't Feng Xiao simply whispered in his ear? Did he really have to do this mouth to mouth? They were so close, even Sui Bichu's lip reading was useless. But immediately, a more vital question occurred to him. Whoever was lurking beneath the carriage must be a high-caliber martial artist, or Qiao Xian would have discovered them. Even among top martial experts, there were disparities in strength. For example, Fo'er had been the cognate's foremost expert, but Feng Xiao was still a cut above. Fighting Feng Xiao at his full strength had cost him his life. Feng Xiao had snuck into Sui Bichu's carriage, feigning intimacy in an attempt to lower their enemy's guard. Did that mean this expert was even stronger than Fo'er? Was Feng Xiao reluctant to attack? In the dark, the corners of Feng Xiao's lips quirked up. Before Sui Bichu could get a good look, Feng Xiao deepened the kiss. Feng Xiao's lips were soft, but he pressed forward relentlessly. Sui Bichu's eyes snapped open. He struggled instinctively, but his strength was vastly inferior to Feng Xiao's. He was quickly pinned down once more. Feng Xiao's breath fanned over Sui Bichu's face. Sui Bichu was sure he wasn't drunk. Even if he were, someone like Feng Xiao would never lose control. Why was Feng Xiao doing this? Was it to confuse the assassin hiding beneath the carriage? At the sight of Sui Bichu furrowing his brow even as his mouth was sealed, Feng Xiao nearly burst out laughing. It seemed far-fetched that there couldn't... I'm sorry. Okay, I've got myself together now. It seemed far-fetched that there could exist someone who was forever one step ahead of their enemies, always able to anticipate the next move. But Sui Bichu was a far-fetched sort of person. In the cognate, he'd used his own life as bait in order to expose Yu Xiu. Feng Xiao had grown curious. What if he hadn't arrived in time, or appeared only at the last moment? Would he then have witnessed a wretched, panicking Sui Bichu? Unfortunately, he missed this prime opportunity. Yu Xiu was too powerful. Feng Xiao had been forced to give his all in their fight. He hadn't been able to entertain himself by putting Sui Bichu in such a perilous position. And afterward, no matter the situation, Sui Bichu had always remained perfectly calm. He kept a cool head in any crisis, just as he had during the uproar tonight. He'd humiliated Princess Leping before the Crown Prince, the Prince of Jin, and all her guests, leaving her no way to save face. Feng Xiao was certain that after this incident, Princess Leping wouldn't feel remotely grateful to Sui Bichu for capturing the rebels. On the contrary, she was sure to despise him. Yet Sui Bichu showed not the least anxiety or concern over the possibility. Feng Xiao wanted badly to see Sui Bichu overcome with shock or alarm, or even better, see him weeping and begging for mercy. He thought it might be difficult to achieve, but right now he could feel Sui Bichu struggling against him and just make out the look of surprise on his face. Feng Xiao knew he'd pulled it off. What a pity the light was too dim for a clear view. Inspiration came to him in a flash, and he thrust his tongue into Sui Bichu's mouth. It tasted strongly of medicine, while Feng Xiao's tongue carried the tart sweetness of mandarins. Unfortunately, Cui Bichu didn't seem fond of the taste of mandarins. He jerked his knee toward Feng Xiao's crotch, but came up short and was held down yet again. The faint scent of herbs clung to Cui Bichu's body as well, the result of consuming medicine day after day. The harder he struggled, the stronger the scent became. Feng Xiao felt he was about to turn into a piece of ginseng. He had a sudden thought. Taoist Master Cui had consumed a vast quantity of precious herbs and medicines over his lifetime. If Feng Xiao sliced him up and ate him, would it grant him eternal life? What? Outside, the coachman's attention had drifted, and the carriage wheels went right over a stone in the middle of the road. The entire carriage rocked and tilted. As if unable to steady himself, Feng Xiao swayed and rolled to the side with Cui Bichu still fast in his arms. Cui Bichu took the chance to punch Feng Xiao in the stomach. Just as he braced himself to sit up, a sharp blade drove up through the floor of the carriage. Its tip glinted, cold and ominous, mere inches from where they'd been lying moments ago. The enemy's attack had missed, but they didn't withdraw. The blade wrenched toward them as if their attacker could see them through the carriage floor. Feng Xiao grabbed Cui Bichu and sprang upward. The floor of the carriage blew off with a thunderous bang, and the two of them leapt out as a white-clad assassin sprang up from beneath the wheels in close pursuit. Still in the air, Feng Xiao tossed Cui Bichu to Qiao Xian before turning to engage the white figure in a flurry of blows. Palms and glinting blades flew between them, practically impossible to follow. Any ordinary assassin would have worn black to blend into the darkness. That this man had chosen white was a clear sign of both confidence and arrogance. Despite his conspicuous attire, he'd successfully concealed his presence earlier. Even Qiao Xian hadn't noticed him. She was stunned. A martial artist capable of holding his own against Feng Xiao had to be well known in the Jianghu, but Cui Bichu was frowning. He didn't recognize this person at all. The man's techniques were peculiar. Some of his moves resembled the saber techniques of the southwest Jinchuan stronghold, though he was seamlessly executing them with the sword instead, the integration of forms as smooth as rippling water. Other moves resembled the Taoist sword techniques of Xuandu Mountain, only more ferocious, bursting with malevolent energy. There was a touch of cold moonlight to his moves, a viciousness that sought to massacre every living thing it encountered. Each sect had their own unique style, and no one was capable of learning them all. If someone utilized multiple styles, they were either showing off or trying to conceal their background. Clearly, this person was doing the latter. His martial arts were superb, yet his appearance was utterly unremarkable. It was a face no one would give a second glance to, and anyone would forget in an instant. Qiao Xian also noticed something amiss. "Lord Chief, the Zoya Bureau has no record of a martial artist of his appearance and training. Has he disguised his face?" "Perhaps," Cui Bichu replied cryptically. Until the sudden appearance of this assassin, tonight had been smooth sailing. Zhen Yue had been arrested, the evidence of his revolt collected. Yet Cui Bichu had always had a niggling feeling that Zhen Yue wasn't the true mastermind. Was this also related to the 13 floors of Yunhai? As Cui Bichu pondered, Feng Xiao and the man in white moved even faster. Never mind the terrified coachman, even Qiao Xian stood no chance of stepping in to assist. She could only wait for the duel to decide the victor. The longer she watched, however, the more alarmed she became. Feng Xiao was a superb martial artist. For this assassin to fight him to a draw, the man must be equally formidable. Who was capable of ordering such an expert to assassinate Cui Bichu? If Feng Xiao hadn't been in the carriage, Cui Bichu would be breathing his last. What if this man came back for a second attempt? Without a protector equal to Feng Xiao, Cui Bichu's life would be forfeit. Qiao Xian's worry deepened. As irritating as she found Feng Xiao right now, she hoped with all her heart that Feng Xiao could kill this man. If Feng Xiao succeeded, she promised herself she'd never make trouble for the Zhejiang Bureau again, no matter how often their deputy chief kept popping up. Of course, had she known what had happened inside the carriage, Xiao Xian would likely have hoped Feng Xiao and the assassin would go to the grave together. Either way, things weren't looking good. Sword glares swirled around Feng Xiao and the assassin, their chi whipping itself into a funnel that trapped Feng Xiao in its center. The man in white never attacked the same way twice. His movements were eerie. He resembled a specter as he vanished and reappeared, using techniques from the ninja arts of Yamato. But while normal ninja arts were mere optical illusions, this man had incorporated them into his sword techniques, making them far more potent. Feng Xiao was soon cornered. The glare from the man in white sword blazed like the brilliant light of dawn as it spiraled toward Feng Xiao, ready to slice him to ribbons. Chapter 94. The assassin's target was Cui Buchu, and Qiao Shen, his protector, wasn't strong enough to stop him. By all rights, he should be dead, and would have been, if not for the sudden appearance of Feng Xiao. Not only had Feng Xiao thwarted the assassination, it seemed likely his fight with Cui Buchu's assailant would continue till dawn. The man in white was a proud person. Feng Xiao's meddling enraged him. After a quarter hour of fighting, Feng Xiao had finally given him an opening. The man in white transformed into an arc of light, soaring into the sky before turning sharply and diving head first toward Feng Xiao, a curtain of bloodthirsty sword glares surging ahead of him. It was near midnight, and dense clouds cloaked the moon. All was silent. Even if the common folk in the surrounding buildings had been startled by the noise, they wouldn't dare come out and watch. It'd be wiser to cover their eyes and pretend they hadn't noticed. As for watchmen or patrolling soldiers, if there were any, then they were far away. Other than Feng Xiao and the man in white, the street was empty but for the battered carriage. A coachman shivering beneath the eaves at a distance, and Cui Buchu and Qiao Xian watching from the sidelines. Qiao Xian had fired off a signal flare to hail the Zuoye Bureau, but even if their people rushed to help, stopping the man in white would be a tall order. In the moment before those swirling sword glares minced Feng Xiao's head to a paste in a shower of blood, the man in white felt his death would be rather a shame. Feng Xiao was ostentatious and bombastic. He'd flaunted himself ever since taking the reins of the Zhejiang Bureau, and no few people hated him for it. Killing him in public before the eyes of a crowd would have been far more satisfying. The Zhejiang Bureau would become a bird with a broken wing. Without the pillar of their deputy chief to support them, they would be forced to disband. But even as the thought arose, the man in white realized his sword glare had met an invisible resistance. The brilliant light flickered out, and the 1,000-strong curtain of swords became a single blade once more, a blade held firmly in Feng Xiao's grasp. Had Feng Xiao used his profound internal strength to grab the blade barehanded? The man in white was stunned. With no time to think, he yanked the sword back, but it was like the blade was mired in mud, or held in place by a 1,000-ton weight. Not only was he unable to pull it free, he found himself being dragged down toward Feng Xiao. In the distance, the Zuoye guards approached, led by none other than Deputy Chief Zhang Sun. His martial arts weren't at Feng Xiao's level, but if they worked together, they stood a good chance at defeating this man in white. The man in white saw that he had come tonight in vain. He abandoned his sword and withdrew, cutting his losses. He drifted backward with uncanny speed. In a flash, he was far away on a distant rooftop. A few more bounds, and he'd melted into the darkness. Feng Xiao dropped from the roof of a nearby building to Cui Buchu's side. He'd caught the assassin's sword with his bare hand. Blood dripped from his palm. He raised the blood-stained sword with his uninjured hand and studied it. Then he shook his head and tossed it to the ground. No identifying marks. Who knows where it came from? It's probably just an ordinary sword. How's your hand? Asked Suibichu. Despite everything, Feng Xiao had saved his life tonight. He knew if he gave him an inch, Feng Xiao would take a mile, demanding credit. But even so, it wasn't something he could ignore. The dark clouds had dispersed, and scattered starlight shone down on them once more. Suibichu's lips were flushed redder than usual, slightly swollen, with a barely visible glimmer of wetness upon them. Xiaoxian had no reason to examine his mouth. These details escaped her notice. It was Feng Xiao who felt the slight weighing on his conscience. Not that he thought himself guilty in any way. Still, his gaze swept silently over Suibichu's lips. His head drooped, and suddenly he paled. Damn! The sword was poisoned! Suibichu's heart leapt into his throat. He caught Feng Xiao on instinct as he slumped forward and saw a rivulet of blood trickle from Feng Xiao's parted lips. Xiaoxian, take a look at him, quickly! Xiaoxian rushed over and checked his pulse, her brows tightly knit. His pulse is weak. He's genuinely been poisoned. I don't have any way of treating him here. Lord Chief, let's take him back to the Zhejian Bureau at once, lest any misunderstandings arise. Zhang Su and Bodi's arrival had been timely. Suibichu left him with instruction to remain behind and clean up the aftermath. He swiftly explained the situation to the city guards and asked them to investigate the man in white before rushing to the Zhejian Bureau with Feng Xiao and Xiaoxian. The Zhejian Bureau lay within the capital, so it wasn't far, only a 15-minute ride. But as Feng Xiao lay in the carriage, his face paled alarmingly. The once dazzling oleander spirit now more closely resembled a withered blossom. Despite the immense agony of the poison, he insisted on clutching Suibichu's wrist, unwilling to let go. Xiaoxian, is his life in danger? Whispered Suibichu. Xiaoxian was shamefaced. This subordinate has only a basic understanding of medicine. I don't dare draw any hasty conclusions. I've heard the Zhejian Bureau has many skilled physicians, so perhaps they'll know what to do. But Deputy Chief Feng's reserves of internal energy are profound. He shouldn't be in immediate danger. Feng Xiao's brow was deeply furrowed. Feebly, he said, Stop talking, both of you. My head hurts. The pair of them snapped their mouths shut. It's so uncomfortable lying on my back like this, murmured Feng Xiao. He struggled to prop himself up on an elbow, then laid his head on Suibichu's thigh. Suibichu had half a mind to yank his leg away and let him crash to the floor, but he recalled what Feng Xiao had done for him and managed to resist the urge. Suibichu hummed in response. You hate me a lot, don't you? No, said Suibichu. Then why are you being so short with me? Suibichu rolled his eyes. Didn't you just tell us not to talk because your head hurts? My head only throbs when Xiaoxian talks. Xiaoxian shifted restlessly, longing to punch him. Buchu, can you tell me? I can't. Feng Xiao looked at Suibichu weakly, then pressed a hand to his chest and began to cough. When Suibichu's indifferent expression finally softened a little, Feng Xiao spoke up again. I'll only ask 3 questions. 1. 2, insisted Feng Xiao. Suibichu's lips twitched. You still have the strength to negotiate? What's your relationship with Empress Dugu? Feng Xiao asked quietly. Why were the Prince of Jin and... Why was the Duchess Yuan so distant and disrespectful? Why was Princess Leping so wary of me, and the Prince of Jin so familiar? Suibichu finished the question for him. Feng Xiao's lips curved slightly. That's right. I don't want to answer that question. Ask something else. But I really want to know. said Feng Xiao. Everything about you interests me. His face went ashen, and he started to gasp for breath. His grip on Suibuchu's wrist tightened, but his hands seemed to grow colder. As he watched that radiantly handsome face gradually lose its glow, a trickle of emotion welled up in Suibuchu. What surfaced in his heart was not pleasure that he'd rid himself of one of the Zuoya Bureau's competitors. It was pity. But pity was all it was. After all, from head to toe, Feng Xiao had only one thing of value to offer: his face. Suibuchu spoke slowly. Emperor Xuan of the previous dynasty was capricious and temperamental. He was always suspicious of the Yang family. But the Duke of Sui's daughter was Empress. He struggled to decide whether or not to usurp the throne. The people around him had differing opinions on the matter, and so he wavered first one way and then another. It was I who came forward to offer advice, lay out the pros and cons of a coup to the future emperor and empress. That's how they came to their decision. Wow. Okay. Feng Xiao was stunned. He'd entertained all sorts of absurd theories, even speculating that Suibuchu was the emperor's illegitimate child or the empress's lover. Yet he hadn't anticipated anything like this. Back when the emperor had been merely the Duke of Sui, Suibuchu had already been his strategist. His council had dealt the final blow, reshaping the northern dynasty forever. Then why? Whispered Feng Xiao. Afterward, the emperor declared me a meritorious servant of the crown. Mine was deemed a first-class contribution, but to accept the honor would have meant too much pomp and circumstance. That's not what I wanted. Rather than the glorious chess piece on the front line, I much preferred to be the chess master in the shadows. Understanding dawned on Feng Xiao. With this, everything became clear. Suibuchu had made an enormous contribution to the realm, yet he hadn't accepted the credit. This impressed the ruling couple, but it also left them in his debt. This is why they'd put him in charge of the Zuoya Bureau at such a young age. They placed a high value on his counsel, particularly Empress Dugu, who viewed him as her chief strategist. In this case, it was natural that the Prince of Jin wanted to win Suibuchu's favor. As for Princess Leping and her daughter, Suibuchu was the voice that had cost them their status as Empress Dowager and Princess of the Zhou dynasty. They respected, resented, and feared him at once, muddying the waters between them. This bit of his history was the ace up Suibuchu's sleeve, a secret he wouldn't lightly reveal. But tonight, he'd told Feng Xiao. Feng Xiao looked up at him and smiled. Then he finally passed out. When the carriage arrived at the Zhejiang Bureau, the members rushed out. They regarded Suibuchu and Xiaoxian with hostility. Despite Xiaoxian doing her best to explain what had happened, it was difficult to convince them. "We've escorted him to you, so we'll leave him in your care," Suibuchu said, turning to leave. He was stopped by Pei Jingzhe. "My lord was attending a banquet. How did he suffer such grave injury? Until he wakes up, I must ask Cui Xianxiang to remain." "Let him go," said Feng Xiao weakly. Supported by servants on either side, he opened his eyes a crack. "My lord!" Pei Jingzhe couldn't believe his ears. Was this really Deputy Chief Feng, the man who'd never pass up cheap gains if the opportunity should arise? The man who, even if an opportunity didn't arise, would find some way to create one? "Let them go." Feng Xiao closed his eyes, as if it had taken all his effort to speak. Pei Jingzhe could do nothing but wave a hand, signaling the Zhejiang Bureau members to back off. They reluctantly watched the carriage drive away. The seriousness of Feng Xiao's injuries had thrown the entire Zhejiang Bureau into a state of alarm. The physician was shaken awake in the middle of the night by the third bureau chief, Ming Yue. He grabbed his medicine chest and ran to attend, still rubbing his eyes. Seeing Feng Xiao half dead at the gates had terrified Pei Jingzhe out of his wits. He stumbled back inside, his legs wobbling. what should they do if something happened to their lord? But upon staggering into Feng Xiao's room, he found the deputy chief sitting cross-legged on the bed, arm held out obediently as the doctor bandaged a wound on his palm. His complexion was rosy, his eyes bright. Oh my God. I knew it. Okay. There was no sign of the man who had seemed to be on the verge of death moments ago. Pei Jing just stared at him in shock. Chapter 95. Pei Jing just stood in the doorway and contemplated his life. He had a clear memory of helping Feng Xiao to his room. He'd personally checked his pulse. It'd been weak and irregular, an unmistakable sign of poisoning and serious internal injury. Was Feng Xiao experiencing a final burst of strength before death? Pei Jing's eyes prickled with tears. Feng Xiao glanced up to find him standing there with his face turning from green to white and back again. Confused, he asked, "Did someone steal your acupoints?" Before Pei Jingzhe could answer, a middle-aged man in dark blue robes rushed in, gasping out Feng Xiao's courtesy name. "Yuntian. These are the 9 transformation pills of our sect. When someone is gravely injured or near death, it can put them in a suspended state." Third Chief Ming Yue lapsed into silence. Both he and Pei Jingzhe stared blankly at Feng Xiao, who was suddenly bursting with vitality. Ming Yue was first to return to his senses. It was an act? By using the turtle breath technique while sealing the meridians, one can make oneself appear convincingly close to death. I'm probably the only person in the world who's thought of combining the two, Feng Xiao said gleefully. The turtle breathing technique was used to fake death as a means of escape, while sealing the meridians could slow the spread of poison. But both were emergency measures, used only in a desperate situation. Who would think to use them for fun? Ming Yue's lips twitched. In other words, only your palm was injured. Did you really need to go so far to make someone owe you a life debt? Feng Xiao arched a brow. But see here, not only did I cheat death, I also learned a valuable secret. Don't you think it was worth it? Ming Yue had no idea what he was getting at. You want the Zuoye Bureau to owe you a favor? Feng Xiao smiled. What value does the Zuoye Bureau have? Without Sui Buqu, it's akin to a person with their heart cut out. The longer Ming Yue listened, the more confused he became. Feng Xiao waved a hand. Don't worry about it. In 3 days, I'll be embarking on a lengthy trip to Boiling Anping with Sui Buqu. Lao-san, I'll leave the Zhejian Bureau in your care. Ming Yue, bright moon. A poetic and sentimental name. From the meaning of the characters, most would imagine a tender woman as gentle as the moon's light on water. Alas, reality was a cruel thing. Not only was Ming Yue a man, he was a simple and honest one, with a plain and unremarkable face. He rose earlier than the cock's crow and went to bed later than the dogs. At the Zhejian Bureau, the chief was a leader in name only, and the deputy chief was always running hither and thither. The third chief, Ming Yue, skipped countless meals and forewent hours of precious sleep, toiling away to keep the bureau running day to day. He was the linchpin of the whole organization. Thus, when he heard Feng Xiao's instructions, he simply nodded. Not a problem. Please rest assured, all will be taken care of here. Pei Jingzhe at last shook himself out of his stupor. May I accompany you, my lord? Feng Xiao sneered. Last time you came with me, I cut your salary for the entire year down to nothing. I fear that if you come along, you'll lose next year's salary as well. This subordinate has made great progress, Pei Jingzhe protested, deeply aggrieved. Feng Xiao raised 2 fingers. I'll give you these 2 choices. 1, you follow me. For every mistake you make, I'll deduct a month's salary, with no limit to how many months can be lost. 2, You can run an errand for me. If you succeed, not only will I return your docked salary, I'll double it. Pei Jingzhe didn't think twice. I choose the second. Nodding in satisfaction, Feng Xiao gave his assent. At the thought of recovering his lost wages, Pei Jingzhe's mood soared. He excused himself, delighted. Ming Yue watched Pei Jingzhe leave, looking like he was walking on air. He smiled. You wanted him to pick the second option from the start. There's no way he'll complete that errand, said Feng Xiao. At most, he'll manage half of what I asked him. If we tally all the deductions and bonuses, we can simply return him the salary that was cut. No need to give him more than that. Ming Yue was rather at a loss. Deputy Chief, I think you might be mistaken about your background. Maybe you should send someone to investigate. Feng Xiao shot him a quizzical look. Investigate what? Investigate if there's a family in the Northern Dynasty with the surname Cheap, who lost a son named Skate over 20 years ago. Unfortunately, Feng Xiao had been thick-skinned from birth. Not only was he unembarrassed, he proudly explained his reasons. That fool Pei Jingzhe never uses his brain. Today, he gifted flowers to the young lady next door. Tomorrow, he'll go help young maiden Song sell her pastries. Does he really think I don't know? He's undisciplined. An unhewn jade cannot be made useful. Young people like him don't need such high salaries. They merely need enough to make ends meet. Any more than that, and he'll squander it on wine and women. The position of the most handsome man in the Zhejian Bureau naturally belonged to Feng Xiao. There were likely precious few people in the Sui dynasty who could match him for good looks. But a face too arresting could also be isolating. People became afraid to get close. Such was the case with the young ladies Feng Xiao had mentioned. They'd initially been dazzled by his appearance, but ultimately decided someone fresh-faced and sweet like Pei Jingzhe was a better choice for starting a family. Pei Jingzhe was always coming in and out of the bureau, and had become a favorite with the young ladies in the neighborhood. If Cui Bichu had been there, he'd have called Feng Xiao jealous. But Ming Yue was an honest man. He simply rubbed his nose, unsure whether to laugh or cry. There's one more thing I'd like you to look into, said Feng Xiao. Ming Yue's ears perked up. Investigate Princess Leping and Lin Lang Pavilion. I want to know anything that might connect them to the 13 floors of Yunhai. Surely that's impossible. Ming Yue's surprise was plain on his face. Princess Leping is a Yang. Do you truly suspect she's the mastermind behind tonight's plot? Though Ming Yue hadn't attended the Thousand Lantern banquet, he'd already heard the gist of what happened. Which do you think is preferable, being a princess or being the Empress Dowager? Asked Feng Xiao. While Ming Yue was momentarily speechless, Feng Xiao continued. How about being the emperor's daughter or being the emperor's mother? But the young emperor of the previous dynasty wasn't the princess's son, protested Ming Yue, and the current emperor actually is her father. There's a difference between a father by blood and a stepson. Feng Xiao nodded. That's true in theory, but don't forget, Princess Leping is extraordinarily stubborn. She was full of resentment when the current dynasty was established. She argued with the emperor and empress in public, and even threatened to take her own life. Though she's relented over time, her attitude toward Cui Bichu makes it clear she's never fully let go of the past. She doesn't dare hold a grudge against her parents, so she's directed her resentment toward Cui Bichu instead. That's only speculation, said Ming Yue. What else do you have to base this theory on? Whoever ambushed me from beneath the carriage tonight was a superb martial artist. How can a kept man like Zhen Yue have the resources to hire such a formidable expert? You think there's someone behind Zhen Yue, and that this person may also be connected to the 13 floors of Yunhai and Princess Leping? Feng Xiao thought for a moment, then said slowly, Perhaps Princess Leping herself is the mastermind behind the 13 floors of Yunhai. Ming Yue was speechless. It was an audacious theory, too audacious. But after hearing Feng Xiao's reasoning, He couldn't dismiss it as wild and unfounded. The realization chilled him. But Princess Leping really doesn't seem like the scheming type. The current dynasty is no more. Even if she slaughters her father and brothers, it won't restore the Yuan clan. Surely she doesn't intend to declare herself ruler. Feng Xiao rubbed his chin. Bold guesses aren't necessarily a bad thing, he said. I'm sure Cui Bichu also considered this possibility. In any case, take some men and start investigating first thing tomorrow. Keep it secret, and keep an eye on Princess Leping. With enough digging, I'm certain you'll discover something interesting. He added with some glee, this time, the Zhejiang Bureau must remain a step ahead of the Zuoya Bureau. Don't let them steal the show. A defeated Cui Bichu forced to swallow his dissatisfaction? I can't imagine anything better. Mingyue didn't know what to say. After a moment he observed, Cui Bichu doesn't know you faked your injury. A man on the verge of death isn't going to be bounding about, ready to head off to Boling after a mere 3 days. Do you really think Cui Bichu is so gullible? Feng Xiao's smile froze on his face. He rubbed his jaw, now looking solemn. You're right. 3 days isn't enough time. Tomorrow, send someone to tell him my injuries are slow to heal. Ask him to wait another 5 days while I recuperate. An idea came to Mingyue. Should we tell them the poison's deadly and you might not recover? That way he'll come see you. No, you don't understand that Cui fellow. He's like a touchy old mule. You have to soothe him, stroke his fur in the right direction. He's clever and mistrustful. The more someone wishes him to do something, the less willing he is to do it. If we say too much, he'll become suspicious. Keep it brief. Mingyue's lips twitched again. As you wish. I'm going back to bed. Feng Xiao lay down and drew the covers over himself. He closed his eyes. If I'm to play the invalid, I'll do it properly. From now on, I'm a gravely wounded patient, too weak to do anything. Blow out the candle for me before you go. Once again, Mingyue was speechless. Feng Xiao listened until Mingyue's footsteps faded into the distance. Then he opened his eyes and gazed out the open window. The hazy moonlight upon the window paper brought to mind the starry glow that had earlier gilded the carriage curtains, the swaying carriage, the soft cushions, and the pale face. Feng Xiao clicked his tongue. A plain and unremarkable face, not even 1/10 as attractive as his own. What good was such a face? But the moans that had escaped those lips hadn't been grating to the ear. He touched his own lips. He'd done it partly out of curiosity and partly because he wanted to test something. But the curiosity had yet to fade. And this test seemed to have netted him a quite specific answer. I may be in a bit of trouble, he murmured to himself. If, in the future, there came a brilliant opportunity to set up Cui Bichu, would he take it? Chapter 96. 8 days passed without incident. Beyond sending someone to deliver medicines to the gates of the Zhejiang Bureau, there had been no movements from the Zuoya Bureau, until Feng Xiao spotted Cui Bichu outside the Tonghua Gate on the appointed day. As promised, he'd almost thought Cui Bichu had forgotten their agreement entirely. Cui Bichu was sitting in a carriage reading. When he saw Feng Xiao, he didn't greet him with his usual indifference. Instead, he was courteous and amiable. He even took the initiative to bow and ask after his health. It's been 8 days. How is Deputy Chief Feng doing? For a moment, Feng Xiao wondered if this was someone else in disguise. They stared at each other. Cui Bichu's face was inscrutable. Now that was the correct expression. Feng Xiao climbed into the carriage at ease. Not well. He sighed softly and extended his palm. Look, the wound has yet to heal. It aches whenever it's cloudy or raining. The weather these past 8 days has been clear and cloudless, Cui Bichu reminded him. Feng Xiao recalled Cui Bichu's perfect memory. Face straight, he replied without missing a beat. That's right. There wasn't any rain, but after the wound scabbed over, it ached and itched every night. It was difficult to sleep. Thinking back to that battle, that man's martial arts were truly beyond my expectations. I never anticipated that he poisoned the sword. Cui Buchu peered at Feng Xiao's outstretched palm. A shallow scar marred the skin, just as he said. Though it would fade with time, Feng Xiao was a narcissist. He couldn't tolerate the slightest flaw in his appearance. Deputy Chief Feng saved my life. I've engraved the favor in my heart, and will never forget it, Cui Buchu said softly. Feng Xiao blinked. He felt that Cui Buchu was acting strangely today, but after saying those words, Cui Buchu didn't continue. So what? Asked Cui Buchu. Feng Xiao was unhappy. In 8 days, you never came to thank me. That's because I was busy tracking down the man who wounded you, said Cui Buchu innocently. Did you find him? Cui Buchu shook his head. He's vanished without a trace, as if he was never there. Fortunately, I managed to discover something else. Consider it my way of partially repaying Deputy Chief Feng for saving my life. What did you discover? Cui Buchu smiled. The poison on that sword was incredibly toxic. 8 days isn't enough to purge it. I found a legendary doctor and learned some acupuncture from him. With this, I guarantee I can neutralize the poison and remove it fully from your body. Can definitely see where this is going. Oh, gosh. He took out a cloth bag from which he removed a silver needle. Feng Xiao was silent. The needle was about 3 inches long, with a wide base tapering to a sharp point. If it pierced him, he feared it wouldn't remove the poison but his life. A muscle in his cheek jumped. I've never seen such a thick needle before. Someone must have been toiling away over the past few days to make it. It looks like it cost no small effort. The more serious the illness, the more potent the cure must be, said Cui Buchu warmly. You mustn't refuse treatment, Deputy Chief Feng. Here, let me prick you twice. That ought to do it. After a drawn-out pause, Feng Xiao asked, When did you realize? I'm so sorry. He thought his act was unimpeachable. When they met today, they'd made sure his voice was feeble, as it would be after a severe illness. His complexion was pale. If Cui Buchu had checked his pulse, he'd have found it faint and fluttering. Feng Xiao had been thoroughly prepared, certain Cui Buchu would be none the wiser. Yet Cui Buchu had seen right through him. Cui Buchu casually threw the needle away and sneered. Deputy Chief Feng, did you forget that the assassin left his sword behind? You were supposedly poisoned, yet the blade was clean. The sword had been turned over to Jiangsu and Bodi at the scene. Though he hadn't been able to use it to identify the man in white, Cui Buchu was a meticulous person. Of course he inquired about the poison. Feng Xiao rubbed his nose. 1,000 clever strategies can't make up for a single misstep. At the time, he'd been so focused on playing dead to distract Cui Buchu from what happened in the carriage that he'd forgotten all about the sword. But I was still injured saving your life, he protested. That wasn't fake. Cui Buchu scarfed. If not for that, would I be sitting here now speaking so politely to you? Displeased, Feng Xiao said, Either way, I saved you. Can't you treat me a little more gently? At that, Cui Buchu really did flash him a gentle smile. If not for me, he whispered, Deputy Chief Feng would have found himself in hot water that night in Qingli Garden. So many nobles and members of the royal family were there. If you alone had managed to escape, you'd certainly have been questioned afterwards. Let's consider it even. Feng Xiao shuddered. Fine. Let's start over from square one. Cui Buchu sneered slightly and dropped all pretense. I have something to ask Deputy Chief Feng. This was the Cui Buchu Feng Xiao knew. Feng Xiao was inexplicably relieved. He waved his fan. Ask away, Having been exposed, Feng Xiao no longer pretended any weakness. He leaned back against the cushions, once again the languid Deputy Chief Feng who cared not a whit for rules. Cui Pichu nailed him with a stare. That night in the carriage, why did Deputy Chief Feng treat me with such disrespect? Feng Xiao feigned obliviousness. That assassin thrust his sword through the carriage floor. If I hadn't grabbed you and rolled aside, how could we have dodged? Cui Pichu narrowed his eyes. What about before that? Before that, Feng Xiao said slowly, I was listening for the assassin's movements. You clearly assaulted me. Feng Xiao assumed a look of surprise. Oh yes, I remember. I was trying to confuse the assassin and lull him into lowering his guard. It was a last resort. Surely you understand, Taoist Master Cui. His face shone with righteousness, his voice perfectly solemn. He grinned at Cui Pichu, the very picture of honesty and selflessness. They looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Cui Pichu snorted, coldly, and asked no more. He picked up his book and began to read. Feng Xiao didn't fail to notice that Cui Pichu's ears were faintly pink. Suddenly, he smiled. When Feng Xiao had kissed Cui Pichu that night, Cui Pichu had struggled fiercely, his shock turning to anger as he discovered he couldn't break free. He'd been so furious his ears had flushed red. The same thing was happening now. His ears were quivering, his eyes reddened in the corners, his lips glimmering with moisture. His confused state was adorable. It all meant only one thing. Taoist Master Cui might look calm on the surface, but his heart was boiling with fury as he plotted revenge on Feng Xiao. Even if the book he was reading was a stately work of philosophy like the Tao Te Ching, in his state it had probably become the 36 Stratagems. Having discovered this small secret about Cui Pichu, Feng Xiao silently rejoiced. Cui Pichu refused to engage with him. He wouldn't even look up. Each sat in their own corner of the carriage, enjoying a moment of peace with their own thoughts. For now, they had called a ceasefire. As Qiao Xian's wound had yet to heal, Cui Pichu had ordered her to stay behind. Instead, he'd brought 2 Zuoye guards. Feng Xiao was traveling even lighter. He'd brought no companions at all. It was a party of 4 people with a minimum of luggage. Their carriage headed east from Daxing City, traveling by day and resting by night. It wasn't long before they reached the outskirts of Anping and Boling Commandery. Though the northern and southern regions of the Central Plains were 2 separate nations, the north, now under Sui rule, had been stable for some time. This was thanks to the diligent effort of the previous dynasty's Emperor Wu of Zhou, Yuan Yong, as well as several bold and decisive measures undertaken after the establishment of the Sui dynasty. The official roads were well maintained and safe to travel, with little risk of robberies or bandits. They arrived at Anping late in the day, when the city gates were already shut. They wouldn't be able to enter until the next morning. Unfortunately, relay stations dotted the outskirts of the city. Any travelers who failed to pass through before the gates closed would stop there to rest. Over time, a number of tea houses had sprung up, and what had been a bare handful of households had become several dozen. Thus, a new village was born. When Feng Xiao and Cui Pichu came up on it at twilight, it was bustling with activity. Outside the relay station, staff had emerged to lead the horses away while the 2 Zuoye guards went inside to speak to the innkeeper. Cui Pichu and Feng Xiao sat outside the tea house, each with a cup of clear tea in front of them. They gazed out at the sun sinking behind the distant mountains and listened to the cheerful clamor of the market, drinking in the atmosphere of the place within their tea. The tea house wasn't large. When every seat was occupied, it quickly became cramped. Feng Xiao barely had to lean over to nudge Cui Pichu in the ribs. Look over there. Cui Pichu had been taking a sip when Feng Xiao poked his side. He almost spit out a mouthful of tea. Feng Xiao sputtered a laugh. You're ticklish. Cui Buchu was considering pouring the tea over Feng Xiao's head when he heard a voice from beside him. It's quite crowded here. There aren't many seats. Could I ask the gentleman to move a little to the left? The voice was crisp and clear as the song of a valley or isle. Even without turning, Cui Buchu knew it belonged to a young maiden. He hummed and scooted a little closer to Feng Xiao before looking up at the newcomer. The moment he saw her, he froze. I think that's a good stopping point right there. Ha ha ha. We don't know who this lady is. Who is she? Don't know. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go over my notes. So, the first thing, wow. These chapters were hilarious. I think that was made evident by the many outbursts of giggles and laughs I had. Oh my God, you guys. Oh my God. This is just all too funny. I'm going to start at the top of my notes this time, I think, rather than... Okay, so let's just go ahead and start from almost the very beginning with page 136. First off, the picture they have of them kissing. You should see the look on Cui Buchu's face. His eyes are blown wide, like, what the fuck? But no, literally the thoughts that were going on in his mind were going on in mine as well, even though I had more thoughts. But I was like, what? Sir, why are you kissing him? Why? You just admit that you wanted to kiss Feng Xiao. Cui Buchu. Okay, Feng Xiao, just go ahead and say that. Let's not blame it on curiosity. Let's not say, oh, just wanted to see if I could weasel some information out of him or see him surprised or whatever. No, you wanted to kiss him. You may have wanted those other things too, yes, but you wanted to kiss him. You did. And the other thing that's funny, at least he didn't seal his acupoints like someone else we know in this universe. So, oh my gosh. And then, when they're kissing, on page 138, Feng Xiao decides to have this little crazy thought in his mind because he smells like medicine. And I'm like, sir, who are we slicing open? Who are we eating? Who is being granted eternal life? Okay, you need to calm down, sir. Anyway. And then we move on to page 147. Oh my gosh, when he's pretending, which I knew it. Anyway, when he was pretending like he wasn't feeling well or whatever. And then he says, everything about you interests me. First off, I was like, oh, my heart. But then second of all, I was like, duh, that's pretty obvious, man. Almost since you guys first met. I say almost because when you first met and, put him in the prison and the instance of helplessness, all that stuff happened, you didn't care a lick about that man. But I think after all those people arrived for the jade and whatnot, those are the moments, the flickers of interest, like, okay, there's more to this man that meets the eye, but, like, I'm interested in that. So, yeah, I just thought it was interesting that he actually said it because it was honest. It was abundantly honest, actually. And I don't even think he's necessarily thinking about it that way. But I am. That's what I'm here for. But yeah, it's just, whew. But I knew that man was faking. And I knew it because first off, we just can't trust him in the first place. But when certain things would happen or he would look a certain way and then get a certain response from Cui Buchu, I was like, okay, so yeah, you're just weaseling into this. Let me pull up the exact examples. Okay, here's a perfect example on page 146 going into 147 when basically Feng Xiao looked up at Cui Buchu all weak and everything and pressed a hand to his chest and started coughing. And then once Cui Buchu's expression softened a little bit, Feng Xiao spoke again and was like, I want to ask you 3 questions or whatever. And then there was another moment, I think, where Cui Buchu looked a certain way, but then he looked sad or whatever. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I knew the man was faking. That's pretty much all I can say. Now, the thing that I find very, very interesting Suibuchu, did you really show up to the now emperor and empress when they weren't and was like, hey, here are the pros and cons of staging a coup? You basically, sir, what? Okay, all right. I don't have anything to say about that. My mind was just pretty much blown by that piece of information. And I have no doubts that it was 100% honest as well. Just like with Feng Xiao saying everything about you interests me, I think the story that he told was real. And my only question is, did he share it in that moment already suspecting maybe that Feng Xiao was faking? I don't think so. Or did he just share it because in the moment it was vulnerable and he thought maybe Feng Xiao was, well, on the verge of death? So that was interesting. The other thing I wanted to talk about really briefly to mention was Ming Yue, this other person. So it already told you guys the meaning of his name, which was clear moon, or I'm sorry, bright moon. So yeah, the interesting thing about these characters, which of course I'm not showing them to you, but Ming, which is the second tone, and then Yue, which is the fourth tone. But Ming has the character Yue in it already. It just has a different radical before it. So anyway, Ming is the bright. It also can just like mean clear. And then Yue means moon. So there's really not much need to elaborate further on that. And the last thing I have to say, apparently, is on page 163. Let me go there first so I can remember. Oh yes, just so you all were aware, when whatever it was that Feng Xiao was testing, which was probably just to see if Cui Bichu likes men, and it was like he's probably plotting his revenge, and although he was reading something that was like the philosophy of Tao Te Ching, just so you guys know, that's one of the two foundational texts of Taoism. That's all that is. And then it was like his mind was probably thinking about the 36 stratagems. The 36 stratagems is a famous essay on military strategies and one of the 7 military classics. So it was probably reading something like The Way of the Tao, but on the inside, like, how am I going to kill this MNFer? So I thought that was funny. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed these chapters. Please, please, please let me know your thoughts and reactions in the comment section, because I could not contain myself. Like, I was trying, but I just could not. And I need to know how y'all feel. So yeah, I'll see you all next time. What is next time? Friday. Yes. And then we get ready for a 3-day weekend. Hey. Okay, anyway. Well, Einiman.